what were the big takeaways from Alabama's loss to Texas A&M?
Alabama's playoff hopes are done. They lost to a 3-2 team. That's how it works. It's how it worked with Oregon last week. It's how it works when Ohio State loses on the road to Iowa a few years ago. It's how it works when any team outside the SEC loses to a 3-2 team. So, sorry, Alabama, no playoff for you this year.
Everybody who was saying that CBS was dumb for picking that as a 7:30 game.
Yeah, we win.
Trust the process. Right. Oh man, what an awesome game! Just shout out to A&M for getting that done with two freshman offensive linemen and Calzada, who quite frankly had looked terrible.
Yeah,
in all of his games, and all of a sudden they busted out. And like the Calzada that we had seen for the first couple weeks was the Calzada that I saw as a recruit. He was intriguing because he had a huge arm, but he didn't really have touch. The throws were not on time. And tonight, man, Jimbo just absolutely unloaded all those tendency breakers on him. They knew Bama ran a lot of man and some of that man match stuff, and they were able to hit a lot of those, kind of rubs and whatnot on these guys. They ran a little more RPO than I think they normally did. They broke out a lot of stuff they don't normally run. And Calzada just throwing strikes and just absolutely painting with heat all night. Well, okay, most of the night. I should point out, I texted the group text. Do you know they had a 0% success rate for the first 20 minutes of the third quarter, with the exception of defensive penalties?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then they turned it back on.
It was like 1 punt and 2 turnovers, right? For the first 3 possessions of the second half.
Oh, no, I don't mean successful drives, Chip. I mean, they had a 0% success rate. They had not run a successful play 20 minutes into the second half.
They never even got to 2nd and 6.
Yeah. And then they turn it right back on after Calzada takes it's a CBS broadcast. After the broadcast crew thought that it might have been a serious hit, serious enough to go to the medical tent, it comes back out there, drives down the field, throws, that was an awesome game.
Surprised they didn't have to amputate. I mean, it's just a terrible looking injury. No, it was that was a really, really fun game, but it was also first of all, was Texas A&M sandbagging for this first month and a half of the season on offense, because this is a team that when they had to go to Calzada against freaking Colorado, they could only manage 10 points, and you've watched them in games since, and the offense has just been stodgy and inefficient and just bad. And then all of a sudden tonight, they only had 379 yards of offense, but they put up 41 points on Alabama. And I locked up the under 16.5 team total for the Aggies. They had that finished by the end of the first quarter. So that was, if you're Texas A&M, I don't know what the win expectancy of this is going to be. Looking at the box score right now, it's probably going to be closer to 50-50 than a dominant.
Tom. College Ball Data has it at 90
for A&M.
Yeah.
Wow, that's shocking based on the numbers, but it does make sense because that's kind of how it felt watching the game. You kept waiting when A&M had the lead in the first half. It was one of those things where it's it's Alabama. They'll be fine. They're going to come back. They're going to win. Everybody's getting kind of worked up, whatever. But every single time that Alabama threw a counter punch, it felt like A&M punched right back. And especially with the chain kick return for the touchdown, is I think that was the moment where I was finally okay, I really think that this is going to happen. I think that they're going to pull this off. And I also think, we talked about this a little bit in the texts too, I think coaching got in the way for Alabama a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think a couple decisions got in the way, just not as far as punting or kicking field goals. And I also think offensively, Brian Robinson was averaging 6 yards a carry. You were running the ball pretty well. I don't think you ran the ball as often as you should have.
So I'm going through some of these 4th down calls, and I get it. You were stopping A&M. And I get that you want to incorporate data from the game into these decisions. And obviously Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time. But several of these that he decided to kick field goals on, these weren't close. Nick Saban messed up.
Oh, no. Get your chart out of here.
No.
I'm not going to take a game like this.
He lost
a game like this. Nah, I'm not hearing it.
Alabama lost.
That's fine. But like Alabama lost because Alabama's wide receivers let it down because they don't have a Devonta Smith and a Henry Ruggs and a Jalen Waddle because they have
Williams had 10 catches for 10 catches for 146 yards.
Listen, there were huge, and like Bryce Young missed some throws too.
John Mechie had 7 catches for 88 yards.
I am not gonna put this on an EPA chart. Like I feel like Alabama's flew them.
It's not solely on the EPA chart, but those are 2 very questionable decisions that he made.
And they're not toss-ups.
I also think
we do it to Kirby. Why can't we do it to Nick?
Yeah.
Listen, sure, we can do it to Nick too. We can do it.
Nick's got a lot more rings than Kirby has, but like,
I mean, it was also like if we're going to come out of this with a takeaway saying that Texas A&M's offensive line did a fantastic job, does that not come back to our big question about Alabama defensively, about whether this defensive line is going to step up and be dominant? Like if the Maroon Goons couldn't get it done against an Arkansas, or if they couldn't get it done against a Mississippi State, now all of a sudden they're looking like they are able to establish the line of scrimmage and be able to free up the space for Texas A&M to get the run game going. I agree that there are a lot of different ways for us to pick this apart, but I don't think that specifically the punting and field goal decisions are going to be what determined this, because those punting and field goal decisions were made with confidence in an Alabama team that, Tom, like you said, we're watching this game expecting Alabama to win. We are expecting Alabama to win because we've got not even the perspective that those coaches have. We've got the perspective of just knowing Alabama, and Alabama didn't live up to its reputation, period, here in this spot.
I will agree that those 2 decisions alone did not cost them the game. The other coaching decisions, like I alluded to, were they didn't run the ball enough. Like, we talk about this Texas A&M defense and how great it is, and there were complaints about the Alabama offensive line tonight. I'm seeing some of the comments. I saw some on Twitter during the game. That was in pass blocking. If you looked at their run game tonight and you look at the advanced numbers right now, they had a stuff rate of only 9% running the ball, which is phenomenal against this Texas A&M front because you kept them out of your backfield. They had a success rate running the ball of 53%. Again, against this Texas A&M front, that's about as good as you can hope for. They were running the ball perfectly fine, but they got pass happy. And it's weird because, you think of Alabama's historically of what they would do. Hell, and sometimes this year, I feel like they got away from being the same kind of team we saw the last few years with Tua and the kind of spread it out with all the receivers that you mentioned earlier team. I feel like they probably should have gotten away from it a little bit more, particularly late there when they had kind of taken control of the game. I felt like they could have just relied on Brian Robinson to really squeeze the air out of that ball and squeeze the life out of A&M, but they didn't. And go ahead.
Well, he had 36, 37 carries, but he obviously late they did.
He only had 24 carries. Only 24
Robinson
carries.
Only 24 carries?
Yeah, 24, 147.
CBS flashed a graphic up there showing he was going up the chart where maybe I was looking at Henry, excuse me.
24 carries, 147 yards, 6.1 per. And they just, and now I feel like I'm not trying to take anything away from A&M because A&M won this game flat out, and Alabama hurt itself with some of those decisions. But the fact is, A&M made plays when you had to make plays, and A&M, like the thing we've seen from this team too at times, like the way that half started, like you mentioned, they had a 0% success rate for the first 20 minutes of the second half. They watched their lead melt away. So many teams would just fold at that point, and they would say, especially when Alabama took the lead, so many teams would just be like, well, we tried, it's done. A&M didn't. They kept playing. They got back in. They got up. They fought back. They won the game. It's freaking awesome for the Aggies. I think it's a huge win for Jimbo. I think it's a really good thing for that program going forward. I mean, obviously with 2 losses, they're not a playoff team this year, but I just think that getting this kind of thing done, it gives you reason to believe, and it gives you hope going forward that maybe next year and the year after that, this is an Aggies team that can be competing for the division, can be competing for the SEC, and therefore competing for a playoff spot.
Did this game remind you all at all of Ohio State, Oregon? Where, so to me, Ohio State was very explosive. They clearly had elite level athletes, but yet Oregon was much better situationally, and they executed when they had to have it better, right? Like they would hit their spots better. And Bama was like, here's a bunch of yards, we're racking up yards, and they weren't actually converting in the red zone. They weren't actually converting some of those third downs. Like they would have chunk plays, but they wouldn't keep the chains moving as well. I don't know. It felt very much like A&M was much better with situational football tonight than Alabama was, and that in a close game, that's a huge difference maker.
Sure. It did not remind me of that, but I do think that final argument there is 100% on, and that
I'm glad I brought it home.
Yeah, no, you did. I was like,
no, I got what you were saying though.
Yeah. The way the game played out, right? You can't associate these two squads, with what we're dealing with right there. Okay, so here comes the cold shower. A&M's got 2 losses. Like, what is this mean for Texas? Texas A&M is going to pop up. They were the second team outside of the top 25 in the AP top 25 last week, so they will obviously be in the top 25. I currently have it projected at number 18. I think they could potentially land as high as 16, but that head-to-head loss to Arkansas is going to put a little bit of a cap on your 2-loss ranking, even with a win against Alabama. Jimbo, I think, is my biggest takeaway. You mentioned it. It's a great win for Jimbo. We need to give Jimbo his flowers. He was talking this offseason about how he was going to beat Alabama before Nick Saban retired. And guess what? You gone and did it. But what is the build for this? Like, is this just a singular moment that Texas A&M holds on to and builds for the future? Or do you think that this team that was able to take down a Crimson Tide team that we had penciled in for the college football playoff is going to be able to string this together? And how about this? You think Texas A&M wins out?
No.
Okay.
So
yeah,
David Hale had a pretty good stat, right? It's if you take a look at the record post Jameis, Jimbo and Harbaugh have the exact same record. Like it's almost identical. Same record against winning teams, same record against Power 5, same overall record, same against ranked, everything. It's almost like within a win of each other. Now, Jimbo just upset the number 1 team in the country and deserves a ton of credit for it, right? Can we see this offense every week? Just 2 weeks ago, we talked about how like it's basically never explosive and they don't hit explosive passes. Tonight they did, and they broke all those tendencies, and they made Calzada look good. If they can focus on scoring points every week and not just time of possession, then yes, I think they absolutely can build on this big time. And they will use this in recruiting huge, especially after what happened in Red River today. But the consistency of scoring points every week is going to be the key. He already recruits the athletes that are freak enough to have really, really good defense on a week-to-week basis.